Stay together. We will not be defeated today.
SJ, family and friends, welcome to the Tulsa Sports Report. I'm your host, Wesley Childers, and we're covering the sports happening on and around the Muskogee Reservation. In this episode, we're recapping the 84th annual TPS All-City Classic, as well as previewing the upcoming Oklahoma high school football season, starting with week 1 tonight on Thursday. So sit back, listen in, and let's begin. So let's start with the 84th annual TPS All-City Championship. For those that don't know, this is the annual Tulsa Public School round-robin scrimmage that previews all 9 TPS schools before the season begins tonight here on week 0. So last Thursday, round-robin play began between 3 different groups. So they split up the 9 teams in 3 groups, starting with Group 1, Booker T. Washington, East Central, and Memorial. And Booker T. Washington was the winner of that group. So each winner of the group play went on to the semifinal/championship game last Friday night. So Booker T was the first group winner. The second group featured McLean, Rogers, and Hale, with McLean being the group winner there. And the third group was Edison, Webster, and Central, with Edison defeating both teams and moving on to the semifinals. Because Booker T. Washington had the overall greatest point differential between those 3 teams, they were awarded the number 1 seed and therefore an automatic berth in the championship game last Friday night. So the first game featured McLean versus Edison in the semifinals, as the winner would go on to face the Hornets later that night. A really tight defensive battle that was scoreless up through regulation. And so when they went into overtime, McLean had the ball first, scored the first touchdown. On the ensuing drive, the Eagles were stopped by the Titans on 4th down. And McLean went on to the championship game later that night to face Booker T. Booker T was victorious in the championship game, winning 21-7 over McLean and capturing their 3rd straight All-City championship. And the Hornets have the most All-City championships all time. So continuing their dominance in that All-City preview scrimmage before the season starts. So, it is a preseason scrimmage, so you can't put, everything into the result, but it does kind of give us a glimpse into how these teams might perform later on in the season. I think Booker T is definitely a lock for a playoff spot and definitely going to compete for a district title in 6A2. I think, McLean and Edison are probably the other 2 teams who have a shot at getting a playoff spot out of the TPS group. So, like I said, I'd say the Hornets are a lock, and I'd say the Titans and Eagles, have a good shot to try to sneak in and get one of those final playoff spots. I know McLean has been really knocking at the door the last couple of years in 4A, so I know those seniors are hungry for a playoff spot. They've missed out on it a couple of years ago on, point differential tiebreakers, so they've been right there. So I think they might, get over the hump this year. So looking on and previewing the rest of the TPS, they're broken up into different classifications. So the Hornets are in the highest at 6A2 with, 5 other teams in TPS being in Class 5A. So that's where most of your Tulsa Public Schools are located in that Class 5A. And then underneath that, you have McLean in 4A, and then Webster with the lowest enrollment is in Class 3A. And the Warriors have just recently brought back their varsity football program in the last couple of years. So they're building up, and so hopefully they can, make some more strides this season and get some more wins on the board. So looking at the largest classification in Oklahoma high school football, that's 6A1, where all the Big Five plays, Bixby, Owasso, Union, Jenks, Broken Arrow, you've got to say that the Spartans, Bixby is the number one team to beat. I mean, their run of dominance, it mirrors that of the Jenks Trojans in the 90s and those Alan Trimble teams. So it's hard to go against them. Coach Montgomery has done a great job there, and they've built basically a dynasty in these last few years and their run of dominance. So if anybody can, probably compete the number one title contender to the Spartans, it's got to be the Jenks Trojans. We're gonna find out a lot about them tonight when they take on South Lake Carroll. That game is down in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl, so that's a great experience, for those kids to go down there and play in that stadium. So really looking forward to see how they perform, and they've got a tough schedule. Their first 4 or 5 games. So even if they go 500 the first couple of games, their district play schedule on the back end is pretty favorable. So even if they struggle out the gate, I still think Jenks is going to get in the playoffs no matter what, and they'll be well battle tested with the schedule that they have. As far as Bixby, they've got a hard game. The first one, week 0 here when they take on Owasso, and so that's going to tell us a lot about the Rams as well, and if they're a true title contender, or they kind of fallen a little bit further back down to the pack, kind of like Union has and Broken Arrow in some of these recent years. So interested in that Big Five and see who kind of breaks through that group and really challenges Bixby, because in recent years nobody has been able to do it. So and as well in 6A1, I think the Big Five on the east side here of the state, they're just continuing their dominance of state championships. So will somebody finally from the west break out in Edmond North, in Edmond Memorial? Who is going to compete on that other side of the state for a state championship? So really looking forward to tonight. Like I said, number one game of week 0 is definitely Jenks versus South Lake Carroll. Number 2 is probably Bixby and Owasso. We've got a couple of other good games. Wagner versus Coweta. That's always a fun battle. The first game of the season, as close as those teams are in proximity. Collinsville versus Booker T on Friday night. That's going to tell us a lot about both teams, especially the Hornets. Are they legit contenders for 6A2? They've got a lot of college prospects on their team. I think they're going to, like I said, compete really well this season. And then rounding out our TPS game of the week is Central versus McLean. And so really interested once again to see, McLean and how they come out and start the season, and if they can, make a run for that playoff spot in 4A. So really appreciate everyone listening. Mado, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next time. Peace.
Stay together. We will not be defeated today.